All right.
Hello.
Welcome to Silent Book Club Author Chats. My name is Guinevere Delamere, and I am the co-founder of Silent Book Club. I'm here today with Nicole Jacobsen, Devin Dayton, and Lexie Nilson, the authors and illustrator of Jane Was Here, an illustrated guide to Jane Austen's England. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us for our virtual Jane Austen tea party this morning. Cheers, and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much. We're so excited.
So I wanted to just kick off with some introductions. We will just go around the table here. I'm pretending that we're having high tea and that we're in person, but pandemic. But Nicole, can you just share, introduce yourself and share a little bit about what inspired your love of Jane Austen?
Definitely. Hi, I'm Nicole Jacobsen. I'm from the Bay Area in California, and my inspiration, or my Jane Austen inspiration, started when I was a teenager, reading Pride and Prejudice multiple times and watching the BBC miniseries with my mom multiple times and pouring through the making of guide. I loved everything about that. But once I was in college, I studied literature and kind of dove in deeper to many different English authors. And once this project came up, and we'll talk a little bit more about the background of our book, I really dove into Jane Austen's world, and she quickly became one of my favorite authors, and I just love all of her novels.
Thank you. Devin, can you go next?
Yes, hello everyone. I am Devynn MacLennan Dayton. I was born and raised in Alberta, Canada, and then moved to Utah to go to school when I was 18. So my love of Jane Austen started with the 2005 Keira Knightley version of Pride and Prejudice. I know there's some haters over there, but it's what got me into her, so let's just be grateful. And I've honestly been obsessed with Jane Austen ever since then. And so it started with that, and then Emma, and then it was like, okay, we should probably actually read her actual words. So yeah, that's my background, and I work as a marketer in Houston, Texas now with my husband.
Awesome. Lexie, over to you.
Hi, I'm Lexi K. Nilson. I met Nicole and Devin at BYU, so I grew up in Utah, but I just recently moved to Baltimore to go to grad school. And my love for Jane Austen started my junior year of high school. My teacher had us read Pride and Prejudice, and I hadn't read Pride and Prejudice before, and I kind of knew about the Regency era, and I was like, whatever. But everyone was like, you should love her because you love dressing up. And then I read Pride and Prejudice, and I fell madly in love. And I had only seen the Pride and Prejudice Keira Knightley version until college. And so ever since then, though, I got really into the Regency era and all things tea party and all things strolling in the garden. So that's where mine started. And now after going on the trip, it's just blossomed.
So great. So I'd love to hear a little bit about how you all met, and then how did you decide to all write a book together? Devin, you want to take this one?
Yes. Okay. So our story is a little unconventional. So we all met through Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah. So when I was a junior, correct me if I'm wrong, Lexie and I actually met really randomly. We kept seeing each other in the library, and we actually just gave each other our numbers. We're like, we just think we should be friends. And so we became best friends, and then we became roommates. And Lexie found out about this grant opportunity through our university to do a collaborative grant. And Lexie's an illustrator, and she loved England. And so she was like, what if we do a Jane Austen travel guide? You're an advertiser, I'm an illustrator, that's 2 majors. And I was like, of course. And then we needed another major. And so we're like, hey, let's get an English major. So we reached out to the English department and told them what we were doing and who we were looking for. They gave us 2 names, and Nicole is perfect and wonderful and everything good. And now we're best friends with her too. So it all worked out. So that's how we all met. It was through school because of this grant opportunity. And it really just was the catalyst of everything.
I love that you guys were sort of covering all of the bases, where you had your sort of like your illustrator, your kind of marketing mind, and then, you know, and brought in your literature expert. So Nicole, what was the writing process like, you know, working as part of a team, as a group effort here?
Yeah, so it was, like Devin said, a lot of collaboration. As we were all undergrads at the time, it was really great to kind of learn more about each other's fields and really take on the collaborative aspect of the project. A lot of what we're kind of shooting for at the beginning was, well, we need to do some research to do the trip. So we planned our trip to England. So I kind of focused on all of the literature aspects, writing down places that were mentioned in Jane Austen's books and in her life. And I have, you know, big stacks of biographies and things that I'm pulling from. And then Devin really built up our social media community, which helped us kind of have an audience for what we were exploring and doing. And Lexie, of course, you've seen her beautiful illustrations. She is just a genius with whatever medium you throw at her. And so getting to see all of our vision come to light was so great. And the writing process really was in stages. There was kind of the prep, there was our travel, and then there was the, like, okay, this is going to be a real book, so let's pull it all together and write the manuscript and have the illustrations and all of that.
I love that this has been, you know, that this started off as, you know, as sort of a school project and then has continued to evolve. But I'm curious about kind of the different stages and Lexie in particular, like your illustrations. How, you know, where did you sort of start? Were you like, you know, were you sketching as you went? Were you sort of, you know, taking inspiration in England and then coming back and kind of sitting down to do a book? What was the illustration process like?
Yeah, so the book kind of, like, when the project came at us, my initial idea was kind of, I wanted to make an unconventional travel guide. And my medium is illustration, and I loved the way that I could, you know, especially travel illustration, where you could be in a place and drawing and illustrating enables me to experience a place in such a different way. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool if there was a travel guide somewhere where it was from an artist's perspective, or it was from somebody who really went there to observe and like bring it to more people, instead of just like words and recommending restaurants and things like that. And so it kind of started when I had gone on a trip and I kept a travel journal, an illustrated travel journal. And then when this came along, I was like, okay, this is my opportunity to see if like there's a market for this. And so when we were on the trip, I was sketching, and I was really just looking at things from an artist's perspective, like fun patterns or fun colors, or, you know, what feeling did we have when we were there? What feeling did I have, and what did I like about it that I could bring to life with my work? And so it was a really fun way to experience it. And that's kind of the book was, you know, it came into being from Nicole went in with her looking for author's notes, and I was looking for artist notes, and Devin was just looking for all of the notes. And so it was fun to illustrate from that perspective, knowing that it was going to be an illustrated guide. We got to collaborate, you know, author and illustrator together to go, what do we want in this book? And I had my medium to represent it, and she had her medium to represent it. So it was really like, you know, I felt like an author in my own way, and I'm sure Nicole felt like an artist in her own way writing it as well. So
that's so great. So we have a question from Allison, one of our readers from Ventura, California. And she is curious about what type of research did you do for your book? Now, Nicole, I know that you mentioned kind of going through all of Jane Austen's books, looking for locations, but can you talk a little bit more about the research that went into the book?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, there was kind of the nitty gritty, like what should we include in this guide? What are the most important places to visit? And then there was even the travel research element, like in what order do we go? How do we get there? And we really wanted to present it like this is a trip that you could do as a Jane Austen fan and go visit these places. And so we wanted to make it doable. Our trip was 2 weeks long. And we hit a lot of places. I think that you would probably want to maybe savor it a little bit more than we did, as we were furiously kind of driving all around England. But making that itinerary was part of the research. And then as Lexi mentioned, while we were there, taking notes and pictures and just really trying to capture what it was like to be there, because we didn't want it to feel like just an informational, but kind of provide the vibe of what was going on. And then even just after coming home from the trip and putting it all down into words, there was a lot of, cross-referencing and checking and fact-checking and pulling in quotes from the books that really represented what we saw while we were there.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So as we're now like all sitting kind of locked in our homes and travel and trips sort of feel like a distant memory. Devin, what were, did any of the locations that you visited really kind of stick out in your mind? Like, do you go back to those places these days?
Oh, definitely. Of course. So our trip was jam-packed with goodness and chaos, but it was so fun. So 14 days, and we basically try to hit anything you can ever think of Jane Austen. So like her life, her family, any of her adaptations where she'd write things. And so we hit everything we could, and so everything was jam-packed. But it was so fun because some of the things that I didn't think were going to be that exciting were wonderful. So one of my favorite places was Lyme Regis. It's like this little tiny coastal town, and I just didn't have any expectations. And then we showed up there, and it was like this big refreshing moment where I was like, okay, let's just stay here for a couple weeks. We'll be happy. It was great. So we really did hit everything I think you could possibly hit. But it was so fun to find these hidden gems, which we talk about in our book. But there's just so much that England has to offer, and so much Jane Austen created in her world, and some of them are realities. Like, she talks about actual places in her book.
That is so cool. And this is just reading this book and looking at all of these places that kind of come to life through Lexi's illustration. Like, it makes me want to go back to all of the kind of original texts and read them again, because Austen did such an amazing job kind of evoking these, not only the place and the landscape, but kind of the feeling of being in these big, in these ballrooms, like walking through the countryside, like the mud on the pathways through in like the little, like those little paths that like connected the house to the town. Like, I just have like such this image of like squelching, right? So Lexi, do you have a favorite sort of Jane Austen spot on the map? This is a question, by the way, that came in from Stephanie in Alhambra, California.
Great question, Stephanie. I wish I want to say all of them, because seriously, the whole trip was incredible. I don't know that you can go to the English countryside and go, meh, mediocre. But my favorite spot was Blackpool Mill Cottage. And it's by a place called Hartland Quay. And it's just a cliffside town. And I think it's pretty generally always windy because it's on the cliff. But the day that we went, it was so windy that I really thought we were all going to blow away. But it was this amazing moment it was one of the first places that we went when we reached the sea. So you're going countryside, like sheep everywhere. And then you just hit the end of the world, it feels like. And it was such a refreshing moment for the trip, but it was also this cool moment of, like, I feel like Jane Austen wrote about these kinds of places. Oh, it was the filming location for the Dashwood's home, the Dashwood Cottage, in the BBC miniseries of Sense and Sensibility. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but anyway, so I identify with Marianne a lot because I love just like emotions and running in the rain. And I liked being there because it reminded me, like a lot of these places, Jane Austen was a real person, and she was really trying to find places to escape to and find ways that she could express herself. And I feel like the seaside is kind of one of those ways that she did that. Just kind of like you're on the edge of society and you could kind of break free from some of those social codes. And I don't know, I felt like we captured some of Jane's wild, rebellious side when we were there blowing away.
I love it. So we have another question from Marja from Orchard Park, New York. Oh my gosh, I think it's still too early where I am because I am stumbling all over my words today. But the question is, what you learned while writing this book? Devin, do you want to take that one?
Yeah. So if you read Jane Austen's novels and her work, you get a sense of independence. She is obviously an independent woman, and we knew that before going on the trip. We knew how great she was, but I think going on the trip and really learning more about her life personally and the work she did and everywhere she moved to, we really got to know everything I think there is to know about Jane Austen that we're aware of. And it was the most unusual thing we learned was, well, at least I learned, was the movie Becoming Jane with Anne Hathaway as the main character. I don't know if you guys have seen that. We watched it very last, and I assumed it was going to be like a historical type of movie because it's all about her life, when in fact it's extremely like historically inaccurate. Like most of the movie had literally, it was all just like, what? That actually didn't happen. This is all totally put out of context. So I think Jane Austen is just way more complex than we all realize. She was way ahead of her time. She was so wonderful, the best friend you could ever imagine. She's probably the most loyal person I've ever read about. And she's independent and she's smart and she was great. So I think that was the most unusual thing for me, is that there's this big, huge movie made about her that wasn't accurate.
I mean, and of course it's the Anne Hathaway one, right? Because
Yeah.
you have to hate on Anne Hathaway. That's
And
just
that British accent.
Oh God. Oh, poor Anne. Nicole, what about during the research? This was a question from Katie in Ann Arbor, but what did you find most surprising during the research for the book?
Yeah, so to give a little background, some of my literature background is with the romantic poets. I did an internship at the Wordsworth Trust in the Lake District, and they were writing around the same time. And Jane Austen and all these romantics, but they were really so different. And Jane Austen lived such a much more conservative lifestyle than these poets, but she still moved around so much, and she still had this sense of independence. And I think that's one of the things that surprised me, that even though, I mean, it was still this very genteel lifestyle that she was living, but it was also a lot more perspectives than I thought she might have had for someone at that time. Like, she just didn't stay in one house her whole life, right? And I think that was one thing that struck me during the research.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we all kind of have this image of, almost like a static image of like what Jane Austen, who she was and what she represents and what her world was like. And, I mean, I know that for me, it's almost a film still. So I love that, I love, the fact that what the book shows is, so much evolution throughout her life, where she lived and, sort of the different things that she was, her relationships and her family. And, it really, it sort of just, builds out so much more of a multifaceted person than, almost just a character in one of her novels. Lexi, I have a question this is from Ron in Council Bluffs, Iowa. What setting in Jane Austen's novels has most retained the spirit of Austen's time in today's world?
Great question. I was thinking about this before we were talking about it, and I was like, well, all of the places, like if they're preserved and they, people know that there's a market for Jane Austen, like a lot of the places will feel like, oh, I'm in the movie. But what we kind of got to after we talked about, like, well, all of them felt really authentic to Jane Austen. Really, I think the most authentic place was Chawton. Chawton is where Jane Austen spent the most most of her life writing. And so there's Chawton House, and then just up the street there's no, excuse me, there's her house, and then up the street is Chawton House, which is where her brother lived. And that story is actually very similar to Sense and Sensibility, where her brother got some rich family just really liked him, so they like left him all this money, and he kind of was like, oh, my poor sisters and mother, I guess I'll give them this tiny cottage down the street. And so if you've read Sense and Sensibility, you know that that's kind of the premise of Sense and Sensibility, is just this like fortunate brother, but then the women are left in the dust. And so being able to go to Chawton and explore this house that her brother lived in, it's this great, big house, and realizing that Jane Austen actually visited there. It wasn't just a filming site. This is somewhere where Jane Austen would have spent time, would have played with her nieces and nephews, would have had dinner. And then she would have walked down the same lane that you walked down to her house to go to bed and write some more by candlelight. So I think Chawton was one of the most you just feel Jane Austen's spirit just like oozing through the walls. That was a really cool experience.
Wow. So this reminds me of a question that came in from Jasmine in San Francisco, and I see a Jasmine in our list, so she might be here right now. But she's curious about which of Austen's homes shaped her writing the most.
Yeah, I would definitely say Chawton Cottage is where she did a lot of the writing, and I'm sure that there were other places that inspired it. When she lived in Bath, she ended up writing Persuasion and Northanger Abbey, which both have significant presence in Bath. But I'd say that that independence that she had at Chawton Cottage, it was her and her mother and her sister who lived there. And then I think one or two servants. They were able to kind of live this female driven lifestyle. And I think that gave her kind of this time that she had to sit down and to write all of these novels that we end up loving so much.
So all really, again, making me travel nostalgic, and I think some of our readers share that thinking, because Susan from Portland, Oregon, wants to know what's the best time of year to visit Jane locales. Now, I know you guys have in the book different itineraries of places you can go, but do you have any thoughts on when we should schedule this, when we're all out of this?
Yeah, I have only ever actually visited the UK in the late spring or summer, and I've gone almost every year since I graduated from high school. But when you were talking about squelching in the mud and those knee deep in mud moments, or ankle deep, whatever, I'm thinking you could really have a great experience, I think, whenever you go. I think going in the winter time or the early spring, you get that sense of what would life actually have been like during that time. It wouldn't have been just this idyllic summer weather all of the time. And I think that's kind of maybe the image I've built up in my mind of England. But I think really any time of year that you can take a few weeks to go explore, you get a different sense of it. But I mean, summer is just classic travel time. And I'm a teacher, so that's the only time I have off.
Good point. I loved the way that in the book you had sort of a trivia quiz at the end, and Emmy from Pleasant Grove, Utah, wanted to know what your favorite piece of Jane Austen trivia was. So Devin, do you want to take this one?
Yeah. So Jane Austen is complex, as we know, but I think my most favorite is about her love interest. So to dive a little deeper, she writes all about love. All of her novels have a happy ending, and that's obsessed with it. But she never got her happy ending. So she was engaged once for less than 24 hours. She got engaged and then was like, why am I getting married? I'm getting married just to get married because people want me to have this comfort. She's like, well, I'm comfortable and I'm a writer and I have my sister and my mother, so I'm good. And so she actually called off the engagement, and she unfortunately died alone, but I think she was okay with that. I think she was happy with her writing and her life, and her independence, and she wasn't just going to settle because that was the norm. And so that's probably my favorite piece of trivia, was that she was engaged once, never married, and just lived, I think she sincerely lived her fullest life. I don't actually know her, but I feel like I do. And I think she was content with her choices.
So this question comes in from Carol, and she is wondering if in the future, do any of you have plans to lead tours of the places you visited?
I mean, yeah, why not?
I think it would be so fun to like get a group together that just were diehard Jane Austen fans, but also had maybe been following along a little bit of our journey. And I mean, I have friends and family always saying like, when are you going to take us? So when things open up, maybe.
Yeah, I had
when COVID's over, hit
us
up.
Yeah, I had a group of about 25 people that I was going to go with in September. That's obviously no longer happening, but it was in the works.
Can we just like organize a silent book club tour, and we'll make this a 2021 or 2022?
Yeah,
2022.
Everyone raise your hand.
Right. Okay, so I wanted to do a little bit of a lightning round. I think that covered a lot of like good information about the book, and we've heard from all of you, but this is sort of a free-for-all. We have some questions that I want to hear from each of you. So first up, this is coming from Caroline in Nashville, and she wants to know, who is your favorite Austen love interest and why?
Is there an order that we should go in?
Just jump in. I see you as Lexi, Nicole, Devin, but you don't have to go in.
That's how I see it too. So I'll just go. My favorite love interest, I think, is Knightley. I think Mr. Knightley is my favorite Jane Austen love interest because I just really like the relationship between Mr. Knightley and Emma. And even though I relate most to Marianne, I also see some Emma in me where I'm like, think I know everything, and then I really just need to be majorly humbled. And I like the way Knightley loves Emma, but their romantic love develops from deep respect for each other. And so I like him as a love. But Mr. Bingley is also very giggly, and I appreciate that. So those are my two.
Mine would have to be Henry Tilney from Northanger Abbey. I mean, J.J. Field in the 2007 film version is dreamy, but also I just feel like he is someone that he could be your best friend, and he's less of the brooding type of Darcy. Like, as much as we all love Darcy, like, I don't think that I would necessarily get along with someone like him. And so I want that person that I can just like be my annoying self to, and I think Henry Tilney is that guy.
Yeah, and for me, I am going to have to agree with Lexi. Mr. Knightley is probably my dream guy. I love how he puts Emma in her place when she needs to be, but still respects her a ton. I am almost too similar to Emma. I try to set everyone up. I'm overly confident. I need to be humbled, but I mean well always. And so I feel like my relationship with my husband is very similar, where we love each other and have so much fun and can talk about anything. But at the same time, he's like, okay, bring it down.
And just a fun fact, Devin did set me up with my husband, so she's
Get out.
Yeah.
True.
I'm still waiting.
That's next on my list.
I love it. Oh my gosh, that's so cool. You found yourself a Knightley. Oh my gosh. Wow. Okay, next round. So for each of you, favorite Jane Austen novel, favorite screen adaptation, and favorite modern retelling. So modern retelling is like any of the sort of adaptations that were inspired by any of her novels. Lexi, go ahead.
Oh, yes. Favorite novel is Sense and Sensibility. My favorite screen adaptation is The New Emma. I know that's controversial, but I love it. And my favorite modern adaptation is Clueless, which is an adaptation of Emma. So.
Okay, my favorite novel is Pride and Prejudice, but Northanger Abbey, I think, is up there. I just think it's so clever. And then favorite screen adaptation is probably the BBC miniseries of Pride and Prejudice. And favorite modern adaptation or retelling might be Bride and Prejudice, the Bollywood version. I think it's so fun.
Devin?
Oh, so good. Yeah, so my favorite Jane Austen novel is Pride and Prejudice. And then my favorite screen adaptation, I could watch the 2005 Keira Knightley version of Pride and Prejudice on repeat, mostly because of the soundtrack. But I also love the Gwyneth Paltrow version of Emma. It like warms my heart. And then the modern retelling is also Clueless.
So good. I really loved Eligible by Curtis Sittenfeld. That I thought was a super fun modern retelling. I think I would have to say Pride and Prejudice was my favorite novel. And then, oh my God, like, I don't know, like 5, 6, however many hours of Colin Firth. That's gonna have to be
Yeah.
my screen adaptation.
That's valid.
Okay, so this is another one for all of, no. Wait, did I do? Okay, I'm having a moment. Did I already ask you which Jane Austen character you most identify with? No? Great. Okay, so this is from Anne-Marie in Provo. And again, for each of you, which Austen character do you personally most identify with?
Okay, 1,000,000% Marianne Dashwood, because I don't have any sense, all sensibility.
I think Elizabeth Bennet, just some of her kind of like stubbornness, and maybe some of that prejudice, but also maybe Eleanor a little bit too. I don't know. It's hard to decide.
Yeah, I would feel like that Lexie's and Nicole's answers were very true to who they are. But Lexie, you have a lot of sense. You're just you have a free spirit.
And free spirit. I love the rain and flowers and falling down hills.
Lexie she didn't have any shoes at her wedding, was just walking in the fields. She's very Marianne. Then I already said I'm Emma to a T. I would like to say I don't consider myself like a rude person. I feel like the new Emma made her seem like a total brat. I like the Gwyneth Paltrow version where she's just doesn't realize what she's doing. So let's go with that version of myself.
And Romola Garai does a good job too.
Yeah, exactly.
So Deborah, one of our SBC members who's on the chat, wants to know why nobody called out Pride and Prejudice and Zombies and Sense and Sensibility and Sea Monsters.
I have not seen Sense and Sensibility and Sea Monsters, but I love Pride and Prejudice and Zombies.
I haven't seen it. I have such an aversion to zombies, so I don't know. Well, maybe one day. I'm curious. I'm very curious.
My husband loves zombies and I love Pride and Prejudice. So when we found out that we could do that movie, it was a game changer. So yeah.
I was still working in publishing when that book came out, and it was one of the ones that we were helping to promote. And oh my God, like that was the best cover reveal I think that I've ever seen. It's so good. That's one where I'm like, I don't even care what is written in the book, like the title and
it's gonna
cover. that's all we need. Okay, group participation. So I'm going to switch us over here to gallery mode. And if you are so willing to turn on your camera, we have some lightning round Jane Austen questions for everybody that we would love to get your participation in. So I am going to be asking, I'm going to give you 2 options. So for example, this is a tea party. I'm going to ask you tea or coffee. And then when I'm going to say tea or coffee, and then if it's tea, you hold up your cup. If it's coffee, you hold up your cup then. We have a few of these to go through. And since this is a party and not just an author chat, we thought that this would be a fun way to get people involved. So if you would like to play, turn on your camera, grab your mug. If you want to stay on, in the background, that is fine too. So first question, tea or coffee? So if it's tea, raise your cup. If it's coffee, that's me. Wow, I think tea won on our tea party. All right, so for you tea folk, English breakfast or Earl Grey? So raise your cup if it's English breakfast that you prefer. Earl Grey? Ooh, English breakfast took that one. All right, ready? Crumpets or croissants? If you choose crumpets, raise your glass. Croissants? The buttery goodness. So technically, not English, but I'll take a croissant any day. All right, scones, or I guess we would say scones if we were over there maybe. Scones or shortbread? If it's scones, raise your cup. If you prefer shortbread. It's pretty close. I think scones takes the lead. All right, let's go over to finger sandwiches. Cucumber or smoked salmon? Cucumber sandwiches. Nicole. Smoked salmon? Devin is not, oh wait, she's frozen.
Frozen.
Oh my gosh.
She's frozen in such a perfect face.
Gasp. All right, it's going to remain a mystery what Devin chooses. All right, now we're getting deep into the food. Scotch egg or meat pie? All right, Scotch egg, meat pie. Meat pie wins that one. All right, marmalade or Marmite? If my husband was here, he would be raising for Marmite, but marmalade, Marmite. Nobody. Okay, clearly we have Americans on the video today. Okay, now controversy. Here we go. Keira Knightley or Anne Hathaway. So Keira Knightley, Anne Hathaway. Emma Thompson or Gwyneth Paltrow? Ready? Emma Thompson? Gwyneth Paltrow? All right. Colin Firth or Matthew McFadden? Think about that for a minute. That's tough. Maybe you can vote twice. All right, here we go. Colin Firth. Matthew McFadden. They're both good. They're both good.
Yeah, they're both good.
All right, that was it for our lightning round. Thank you all for playing. Lexi, Nicole, Devin, is there anything else that we did not cover about the book, about the experience of writing together? Any last anecdotes about Jane that you would like to share with us?
I can't think of anything right now. This was
kind of just
lovely.
putting you on the spot.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
I would just say read the book.
Yeah, read the book. I would say this really began as a passion project. None of us three were like, this is for sure going to get published and we're going to have this big following. It was more just, we all love Jane Austen. We all love traveling. Why not make something that we love, and we'll see if other people love it too. And so I guess if anyone else has a passion, you might as well go for it, because it could work out. We can show you that.
True.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, for talking about the book, for sharing your experience, your deep knowledge of Jane Austen, and for playing a silly little game with us on Zoom. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now. If I can figure it out.